You can go home and measure them. They're the same height. I'm not kidding you. But because we're not viewing these guys in isolation, we have the distance cues of the tunnel. When things are further away from us, they tend to look a little bit higher. Things like that are influencing your processing of this picture. So for these guys to be the same size on your retina, the one in back has got to be further away and huge. So one way to think about this is if you're walking outside and your friend's coming up from 50 feet away, when he's that far away, he's tiny. Tiny. He gets closer, he gets bigger. You're used to this. It makes sense. This is a case where you're using that cue and it's kind of breaking. So, guy in the back, and even that we're saying that it's the guy in the back and not the guy to the right and up of the guy, but giving it a depth annotation does say a lot about perception and what we're doing. Okay, does that make sense? All right, another depth cue we use a lot is shadow. Our world is very regular, which is awesome. The sun tends to give light from above, even though it might change a little bit. Shadows are below us. And even when we do naturalistic lighting, like in this classroom, shadows are below us, lights from above. And this is an incredibly powerful depth cue. So what is the difference between A and B? Yes, you guys are awesome at this. So the core important difference between A and B is where the shadows are. An intermediate step would be that the balls in A look like they're all just resting on the plane. Balls in B look like they start coming off of the plane. And it's because of the difference in the shadow positions we see this. Everything else in these pictures is exactly the same except for the shadow. And the shadow is having a huge influence on how we're perceiving the picture. Okay. So now we get into context effects, which I absolutely adore because they're fun. And so with both of these, I'm going to show you something, ask you to do something with it. There's two, and if I need to flash them a couple times, that's fine. So with the first one, I want you to try to read it. What did that say? Okay, and with this next one, identify who is in the picture. And, okay, and the reveal where we all laugh and have a good time. So when you read the top, you read it as the cat. Now that you have time to look at it, you see, okay, that's not necessarily right. The is correct. Cat, not so much. I'm not sure how you would pronounce CHT, but that's technically what's there. You're using the surrounding context, so in this case, me asking you to read it, thereby inferring it should be readable, along with C blank T with something that looks kind of like an A. Sure, it's cat. In the bottom, we have a definite picture of Bill Clinton, and behind him is Al Gore with Bill Clinton's face photoshopped on. You had a limited amount of time to try to identify the people. You used the cues you had, so Bill Clinton definitely in front, some guy, dark hair, kind of Bill Gore looking. Sure, we'll call it Bill Gore. So you're using the available information you had to try and make a judgment. With more time, you can analyze it and say, okay, yeah, that's not Bill Gore. Or Al Gore. Oh, it's one of those days. Okay. All right, does that make sense? Okay, so why do these errors happen? These errors happen because we live in a very regular world, and we learn to live in this very regular world. And so this previous experience with the world tends to lead us right in decisions. Shadows tend to be a good cue. Depth tends to be a good cue. Context is an excellent cue. But they can be led astray, like we've seen. But this experience is a good thing. It saves us time in the long run. All of this that we talked about with the errors is a top-down phenomenon. It's this previous knowledge that's causing these errors to happen. If you can find somebody without previous knowledge, they don't see these errors. A couple weeks ago, we had a guest speaker come in, Ione Fine, who worked with this guy, Mike May. Mike May had, he had a chemical accident when he was 3, so he lost his vision until he had a cataract replacement, basically, in his 40s. So he was blind, 3 to 40. And so he still had some vision. He was able to see stuff, but he couldn't make sense of the world. It's getting better with more experience, but lacking a lot of experience, he wasn't getting a lot of these illusions that we do, and he still doesn't. So a quick example is navigating the streets is difficult because shadow isn't that much of a cue for him. You don't think it would matter that much, but navigating curves without understanding what shadows do is very difficult. So it just looks like a line, you trip. That's bad. So experience is good. Okay, so one of the surprises is we're going to talk a little bit about pet vision. I adore kitties. I love them, and so it's interesting to see how they see the world versus how we do. I understand that not everybody likes cats as much as I do, so we're also going to talk about dogs. Okay, so this first one is sort of people versus dogs. On the left is a picture representing how we see the world, and on the right is kind of a representation for how dogs see the world. So dogs only have 2 cones, we have 3. They also have a lot more rods than we do, and since rods are really the light-sensitive cells, they bleach out really easily in a bright day. And so that's why the dog picture looks kind of washed out. Also, some trivia for the dogs and cats is they have this structure in their eye called the tapetum lucidum, which is basically a reflective layer that helps them absorb more photons in their photoreceptors. And so this tapetum lucidum is why you shine a light at a cat and it looks like its eyes glow. It's just bouncing straight back at you. Okay, so that's doggies. And for kitties, kitties also have 2 cone types. So with this, people see the bird very vibrantly. Cats, not so much. On the right is what black and white vision would look like. So cats have far more rods than dogs do, so they bleach far easier, but they do still have some color vision going on. Okay. Any questions about this? Okay. Surprise number 2.